What's up, guys? I have another camera here, Vivitar v3800n. So what the issue is with this one is it's just kind of jammed. It doesn't really wind. You can kind of force it, but it doesn't shoot at all. So I kind of already took a peek inside and I found that one of the pieces was loose inside, causing it to kind of jam up. So I'm going to show you exactly how to fix that. Alright, so what you'll need to do is pretty much just take off the bottom cover here from these 3 screws. And most of the time when these cameras are jammed, you could figure them out by just taking the bottom cover off, taking a look around, see what's not moving, what's moving. And that's kind of how I figured this out. Popping that off. So to show you how I found this, you could see that it moves, and if you force it, it'll go, but it's not quite catching it here where it should. And I know what the inside was looking like, and so I saw that like deep down in there, that piece there, that's a piece that's not supposed to be there. So what we need to do is take off this front cover first, take a few screws out, and then see if we can grab that part out. Alright, take this screw off up top. Then we'll want to take this flathead screw out also. One thing to be really careful here is there's a spring inside of here. So what I'm using is just taking tweezers, holding it there so it doesn't shoot out. And it came loose right there. And then, so we don't make it more of a mess, let's just grab that screw before it falls in. And then one more screw right here. And then once you have those screws off, this just comes right off. So you can see right there, this I believe is for the exposure wheel, and got jammed, so I may need to flatten it out or kind of straighten it out so it works for the front, and I'll show you where that's at and we'll get that fixed too. Once that's out, before I even just kind of ratchet it back, I want to reassemble everything here. It was very similar how it was on. The tricky part, will get that spring back on. So same thing, we'll put all these screws back in. And then for this screw, what I normally do is, I'd say it's best just to put the screw on first, and then we'll worry about getting the spring in. So use that to get it kind of set in place, get it in the right spot, and then carefully start to screw it in. Make sure it doesn't fall in. Go tight, but not too tight. And then we'll use the spring. So how this goes is the spring goes over the top of that screw. Get it in place first. The longer side goes underneath here, and this wraps around to tuck underneath on that side. This could be tricky. What I do sometimes is use a screwdriver, something to hold it in place so that spring doesn't shoot out. Just to get it tucked behind first, like that, and then just push it back over. So make sure it's there. You got it pushing on that side, and I think that should do it. Now we're gonna take a wind, see how it functions here. And now looking at it, I think this piece actually needs to go over. So we can push that. There we go. So it catches there. I probably had the timer activated from last time. But now we're getting it to complete its cycle. So that looks good. Now we'll go to the top and put the part back. Now the part that we have to get to is here in this dial. What you use is a spanner wrench to loosen up that first. Or you could use it to take the whole thing off. Sometimes I loosen it and then I hold this part down, use the tweezers kind of get the rest of it off. You have a little more control, and then pull that part off. Make sure you keep this spring loaded. Another thing you want to do is probably turn it to something like the bulb setting. That way I know where it's kind of all facing that way. There's a spring underneath it, so lift it up slowly. There we go. Move that to the side. Move this off to the side. There's that spring. And then pull this cover up. And now we're getting closer. Pull this little ring out. Pull this part off. Just note where the position is. The spiky side. Like for this, spikes up. And then this piece is actually where it came off of. So we could see right there, those rivets are the two parts that it came from. Give you an idea. So we'll glue that back together, put it back in, and be good. So I happen to have another piece here. You can see how this is missing. The piece that we have is kind of chewed up. So I'm gonna bend this back so it matches here, and then we'll glue it back. So to look at it here, got it bent. I kind of did a comparison laid on top, made sure that all lined up fine. Now, we don't need this piece. We are gonna just glue this back onto here. Take some super glue, put a dot right where we kind of see those rivets, and then we'll set the piece over the top. Be really careful and try to line it up with those two holes that I was in before. And I kind of feel it sink in, so I'm going to leave it there, hold it for a second, and then put another layer on top, just make sure it stays.
A few moments later.
Alright, so once it's close, I'm just going to do the same thing, put a little more glue on top, just to make sure it locks it in one more time. And then after this, I'm going to let it sit for about 10 minutes, let the glue dry up, and then we'll put it back in. Alright, so we got this piece here all glued back together. What we'll do is go ahead and put it back in place, assembling it the same way we took it apart. Put that piece in. Next one is this one. Make sure you know where the spikes are. I had my spikes up. Put that in place. Put the copper ring back on top. And what you'll want to know is where this notch is. Keep note of where that notch is. So I'm going to keep it down, and you got to line it up with this notch here so that they both kind of sit right on top of each other. That'll be important when we put the next thing on. Put that spring in, and then when we put this dial, put the numbers back in, make sure you get it into that spot so that it lines up with both. And you'll notice it springs down. You want to make sure it goes all the way through and it meets that second part. Hold this in place. While holding it, put your shutter speed dial back on and kind of make a switch transition. What you want to do is get that to snap in and have this rotate freely. Make sure you can rotate it and it doesn't go beyond the numbers. That way you know it's in the right spot. So while holding that down, we want to put this screw in. What I usually do is try to get it started first before we tighten it. It's a little tricky. You got to keep that held down. Once it kind of gets some threads, you'll notice you could just start to spin a little easier. All right, once you get it kind of like hand tight, it should still this function just fine. Then what we'll want to do is tighten it up with a spanner wrench. Just a little tight, not super tight. Take that off. Make sure you can rotate through all of these. Make sure your ISO dial functions just fine. You could rotate through all of the ISO just fine. And it stops at 25, and then also stops at, I believe it's 3200. Yeah. Once that's good, another way to test it is you want to use, if you go to your bulb setting, you wind it, and then you let it go. Keep it held down, you know you got it. If you missed it, then you might have this dial backwards. So now with that in place, everything should work just fine. Just testing out the speeds a little bit, and you can check the ISO, make sure the light meter works, but pretty much that's it. Feel free to comment below if you have any questions. Check out my links in the description, that way you know what I used, and I'll put some tips there as well. Thanks.